welcome to Christchurch in Dunedin, and we're delighted to have Mereana Wilson-Roy talking to us today. And she's going to be talking about a fantastic project that she did and did a Masters of Public Health on, although it should have been a PhD, which is on bicultural lake models to support tangata whenua and freshwater management. Mereana talked to us last year in Wellington, and everyone really enjoyed it. So I was really delighted to have that she was able to come back this year. And we are recording it this year in case she is not available in the future. Mereana works for the Ministry for the Environment and also for the QE2 Trust. So she's got a really fantastic, interesting job in terms of environmental issues in New Zealand as well. And I will hand over to you now.
Oh, thanks. Kia ora, morena koutou katoa, ngā mihi te monoi kia koutou. E hara mai ki te whakarongo o tēnei kaupapa, te waiora ngā awa, ngā roto Aotearoa, ngā mihi te monoi kia koutou. Oh, I'm going to go straight to them. Ko wai aho. Ko maunga pohatu te maunga, te tauki te awa. Maunga pohatu te tauki o ku maunga tarawera whakatāne o rangitaiki o ku awa. Ngā tātua te waka. Ngā te awa tūhoi te aitanga hauiti o ku iwi anei aho. Mereana Wilson-Roy. Tōku inga, tēnā koutou katoa. That is my lovely papakainga. Anyone know where that is? Do those pictures look familiar to anyone?
I've never seen little Aki before, so I suspect that's the mountain.
Yeah, that's two mountains, because I've got quite a few mountains there. That's Mount Edgecombe, that's Lake Tarawera, so you're getting an idea now. And that's where the eruption was a long time ago, and that's our waka on the lovely coastlines in Whakatāne, which is where my home is, where my family are, and where I go to fairly regularly at the moment. That's a bit about me, and if you know anything about Te Ao Māori, you'll know why I started with my mihi whakatau, because it is about place and space and where you belong and where your bones are. But you can also possibly see why I chose lakes and water too. I'll go back to the start now. I have a background in botany and public health, and I kind of fell into health, and now I've fallen out. I think I've gone back to the environmental space, which but I find actually it's been really helpful because there's different insights and ways of thinking and doing it, working in different sectors. And I've brought a lot more, I suppose, with the health context actually, a more holistic to a lot of the environmental sciences, which is quite quantitative and very microscopic, some of it very microscopic. And a lot more of the work now is part of the water reforms that have been going on since 2009, so 10 years. Been working with reforms. I've been working in it for the last 5 years. I've been involved working with iwi all around the country, and have sat on a number of national funding panels for our big water projects. And I've just finished with the ministry now, signing up the last of our projects under the previous water reforms. So this is very much my passion, what I love doing, and it's been great to actually do some of this work myself. I'm working with our Te Aroha whānau, who are the tangata whenua, so they have the connections to the 14 Rotorua lakes and the Central Plateau. So I'm kind of Eastern Bay of Plenty, so I'm not touching on the last 2 or 3, Rotomā, Rotihu and Tarawera, which is one of those as well. And this one is Rotorua. So a wee bit about me. Right. So I had a very ambitious research question, and I actually know for a fact I confused the department for at least a good year, I think. As I said, I've kind of had quite a eclectic career path. did my degree initially in botany and a postgrad in marine science, and then I kind of got dragged into health as a research assistant. This was in 2000 when the treaty settlements first started, and I was based in the south with Ngāi Tahu, one of the forerunners down there in Otago. Christine Wiemene with John Broughton helped set up the Ngāi Tahu Health Research Unit, and she's like, you should be in health, don't worry about the fish, you need to be over here. And I was like, no, fish don't have emotions and feelings, I don't have to worry about them, and just tag and let them go. But anyway, I ended up in health and working on some qualitative studies at Christchurch. And I confuse the Lees too, because he's still around. I think he is, maybe, or D, Richard.
Not sure.
D. And they were like, why, it's a science, environmental science, why are you working in public health? I'm like, I don't know, but it seems to fit me for it now. So that's how I got involved in public health and started doing this. And that was, I have to say, 20 years ago. Yeah, I'm getting old now. And I've spent most of my career in health, to be honest. And I've only just in the last 5-6 years come back into the things that I love the most. But when people ask me now, there's a bit more conversation dialogue. So they're like, health and environment, public health and health science, why is that combination? I'm like, I'm all the abbles. Swimmable, drinkable, mahi ngakai able, my cultural part. And yeah, all the abilities of our water and what it does provide for us and what it doesn't provide for us. So, and that's more and more a big factor these days, because our water is under pressure, and it's, as a natural resource, New Zealand's traditionally not had to worry. And you can tell because a lot of the water science that's been going on, and I've been heavily involved in procuring a lot of that science the last couple of years too, is we actually don't know. We don't know a lot about our own water systems. We still don't know a lot about our lake systems, which is why I picked lakes research. At the moment, we have a big NB funded 5-year program that GNS, Hawthorn and 3 or 4 universities are involved in, and they're actually taking samples of 380 lakes around the country at the moment, 4 samples. I'm an advisor on that project, and some of these lakes are the first time we've ever taken any samples, water samples, 4 samples. There's over 3,000 lakes in the country. So yeah, there's a huge knowledge gap that we still need to understand a lot better. And another big knowledge gap in the water science space is our groundwater systems. And I suppose probably the worst case scenario, which is kind of played out already, is Havelock North in Hawke's Bay, where there's a combination of things, but a lot of it, especially in the eastern, actually most of the eastern side of the country, we're quite heavily reliant on our groundwater sources, but we have very, very little understanding of what's going on by systems or how much we're taking and whether it's able to be maintained. By what's happening recently, it's probably not. So have you guys got any questions before I start going kind of more into the research?
Can I?
Yeah, sure.
Did you ask all those questions as part of your master's?
Yeah, I had bigger ones than that, but these were some of the ones that when I presented at the Freshwater Conference at the end of last year, there's a lot of what the freshwater environment and sector scientists, how we integrate a lot of this knowledge. As I said, I've been working with iwi a lot in the last 4 or 5 years, because water is still an outstanding treaty matter, and it's been put off since the start of the whole tribunal process in 1975, because they're like, oh, it's all too hard. And so I'm sure you've heard some of the statements, even the national government, and now the statement's slightly changed, but it's pretty much the same. So under the national government, it's nobody owns water. Under this government is everybody owns water. But either way, no one's taking the responsibility for how it's managed effectively. And so iwi have been there constantly and will continue to be. but a lot of the settlement regimes that are coming out may provide new pathways of working and doing environmental health very differently. And I say that because we've had the Whanganui River settlement, the Waikato River settlement, we have the INTERVENTION, which is one of my rivers settlement, the Kaituna. A lot of them have settlement acts on those river catchments, and we're figuring out what that actually means. But for the Whanganui, it's kind of a forerunner in that it's illegal. The river and its catchments, or the land that belongs to it, is a legal entity in its own right, and it kind of has two parents, the Crown and the iwi. So they have to do what's in the best interest of the river. And as I said, we don't necessarily know what that looks like yet. It's still a matter of figuring that out, but that's part of the rights and interests conversations that are going on. Waikato's been one of the iwi that have been more settled, and they've got they're doing a lot more practical and hands-on stuff now, but under a lot of settlements, like with the lakes have a settlement too. There's funding that came back under the settlement to restore the ecological health of the lakes. So this is one reason why Te Arawa approached me to help them in building their capability and capacity, but they already had a lot of their values done. So these were kind of more questions that came as a result of completing the research rather than the start. One of the key questions for me at the start of the research is the different knowledge systems and how we could actually incorporate them in a modelling exercise. And I use 3 different knowledge systems. So the environmental science information, kaupapa Māori, and our tauranga that was inherent, and then economics and economic modelling and concepts. And actually what I found was that the economics was more the pathway that allowed you to combine different knowledge systems and ways of thinking. The problem with that was how you valued and prioritised those things. And we'll see that in the work. So yeah, these were some of the questions that came up. And I'll go through this presentation and I'll show you how it moves. Oh, sorry. So, like I mentioned, it was meant to be a dissertation. And when you look at it, it ended up pretty much being a PhD. I was like, gutted. Yeah. Rather have a P rather than an M. But, oh well, it's done now. So, so I'm glad it's done. But I did have a lot of help too. I had 4 supervisors on this, all different backgrounds. I had Dr. Paul Blatch, who's got a health environmental background, Kiri Te Aho, who's our Māori, Māori lecturer here, William Lung, I'm sure I frustrated him a lot. He's got a health economics background, and then I had Graham Dole, who's a professor in ecological economics in Waikato, and he's kind of been our lead advisor in the modelling space. Yes, that was an interesting exercise, research by consensus, but I'm sure you're not that unfamiliar with that. Anyway, those were the 3 stages of the research. In 2016, I worked with Te Arawa, and we, as I said, it was kaupapa Māori methodology. So what, I'm not sure if you're that familiar with that, but that's, Linda. We had a quick chat about it, and we had some readings. Yep. Oh, great. So you all would have read the decolonising methodologies. Not that one. Okay. We've read some others. She's kind of been the forerunner, Linda Smith, in that space. But the importance of that is actually having the community or the whānau that you're working with in that cultural space. They lead the research question and the research, and from their perspective, and as a researcher, you come in and support the achievement of that, which is usually quite different from a kind of more academic exercise when you're setting your question and frame. But that's how that worked. And then the second phase was, it was actually getting the approval. That took about a year. And that was because a lot of this is a strong environmental health background, and I had to really provide some sound rationale and why it was a public health one and not a master's in science. Because I could have done, I could have done some of this under a master's in science, but wouldn't have been as comprehensive. I wouldn't have been able to bring in the different theories. And yeah, that was quite an interesting exercise, hence why I had 4 supervisors. It's not why I could fail with that many, right? And then the last part was the actual completing the research itself. So that second phase was more does this fit? Why does it fit? And for me, I had to give a pretty solid argument. But considering public health is backed off epidemiology, which is originally started from the cholera outbreak in water, I figured I had a pretty good sound base to work from. Yeah. So once again, those are the 3 stages of the work. A lot of the work in 2016 was working with Te Arawa to understand what their aspirations were, where they were coming from, and what they wanted to achieve on the lakes. So like I mentioned, in 2006, Te Arawa, which is the tribe and the many hapu sub-tribes that belong to all those lakes in the Central Plateau, they had their Settlement Act in effect. They are now part of the governing bodies involved in the management of the lakes. Through the settlement, I think there's 30 million over 20 years that was committed from the Crown to restore the lakes. So because of that, there's been a lot of work that's been done on the lakes, and they've got a lot of interventions too. So that's been great, but feedback from the iwi was, that's all great, and here they gave me a box about as big as this desk. It's high with so many PhDs on the phone. They're like, have a look, see what you can make out of all of that. And I'm like, oh no, I don't even know if I want to go there. You can have a look in there. It's a bit of a Pandora's box of research. And they'd had it done. There's obviously information that was informative and helping inform the management of the lake, but it wasn't talking or resonating to the people who are kaitiaki or the guardians for the lake. Didn't really make sense to them, didn't reflect any of their goals or aspirations. So we flipped it. And I said, forget that, let's put that box where it was, collecting dust on your shelves, and let's go back, and think about what it is that you want to do. And this was the first part. There's 2 models in this work. The first one was the conceptual model. So it's very much a qualitative exercise, but it was around understanding where they're coming from, their place in space, what's important to them, and then we tailored the information and the science around that. So that's understanding their core values and designing a concept that reflects their goals and aspirations. Yeah. So when we first started on this exercise in 2016, Roku Mahinui, the CEO of the Trust Te Arawa Lakes, and on behalf of all the whānau that belong there, they had just printed what they called Te Tuapapa, and it's Te Arawa's cultural values for the lakes. What is the importance of what they consider are the importance? And they actually, what I like about this, they actually categorized it, which is not usual. When it comes to Te Ao Māori, it can be very esoterical, and one word can have many layers, and you have to kind of unpick a lot, and that kind of frustrates your environmental scientists to no end. You can see like a 0.001 difference, statistical difference. That's critical. So this stuff is the opposite end of thinking. but it actually helped set a frame, identified their core values, and they were very general, and they did a series amongst themselves of poi, consultation meetings, at each one of their marae to test these concepts and these values and whether they resonated with their communities. And this helped shape the tuapapa and I call it their why framework, which actually it resonates pretty much around the country. Each region has its own kind of flavours and tastes, but at its heart the principles are pretty much the same. So at the top layer it's just why or water and the different values that they have for that. The second layer, waiariki, which is translated as the water of the gods. Ariki is the gods. But also that's the name of the region. Waiariki is the region, the central plateau. But also the fact that they consider the waters in that area to be that pristine, that godly-like. But when you do the science, that actually does validate some of that thinking with the groundwater sampling, and you've got the geothermal lakes, they're all volcanic lakes too. And then you've got the lakes that need a lot of TLC. And I would say Rotorua is definitely in the TLC end. And then under that, you've got three different elements. White water, the health of the water, and what some of the consider are the benefits or the factors that make up healthy waterways. Wairua, the spiritual nature of water, and kind of like special places and spaces that, like for example, Puna Springs, and there's lots of them in that area, where they're naturally probably more protected or have higher value than other areas. And Waiata, and I think I like this one the most. This one was really reflected well. Ata is the rhythm or the flow, and it also talks a lot to the social element, and you'll hear it in tikanga Māori or te ao Māori, you'll hear it in the way they do things in their songs. They'll always be talking about their waterways or systems or their lakes or their rivers, and their whakapapa or their whaikorero stories. They're always linked to waterways and systems. And it's the way to express the health of the lake too. And with the youth, the rangatahi that we worked with in 2006 who did all the field work with us, they ended up, through their experience and coming and monitoring once a month on 6 sites, on 2 lakes up there, they started creating their own songs and around their experiences of being kaitiaki for the lake. So yeah, I think that's kind of right. So what you've just seen is the core fundamental values for the water, but not any particular lake, just the value of the water itself. So yes, back in 2016 when they presented that to me, we're like, we want to make this happen, which was quite different to all the modelling where it had happened before then. And knowing they'd been part of the national reforms and under the national policy statement, which is our tool to set the national direction and legislation for all waterways. It was their reflection of Te Manawa or Te Wai, which is upholding the status of our waterways. So they've got their core values, and that's great, and we could have, and we did for a lot, centre some of our work and look at different environmental factors around those values. But it was, in the end, what did they want to see with their lakes? What was their goal? What do they want to achieve? So their statement in Te Tuapapa is the whakatauki, te mā o te wai e reti ana kia kite i ngā tapuai a te kaura, which means the the water is so clear that you can see the footsteps of the coda, which is a freshwater crane in the lakes. So if that's your goal, then there's a couple of things that really stick out environmentally. That the water is clear, that there are coda, and that they're enough so you can see many of the steps in the lakes. And if you ever go down to it sort of on a typical day, you can't see the bottom of the lake, even though it might be less than a metre, just because it's so cloudy and murky, let alone see footsteps of coda, let alone see coda. And also coda tend to be a nocturnal thing. So, but if when they're abundant, it's not a problem. And when you see some of their traditional photos and hear their stories, and that it was really common, it was their main food source. And now, you'd be lucky to get a bucket if you're lucky. And then there's so many restrictions now. So, but yeah, so that's actually what this whakatauki becomes really important in the modelling part, because it's actually, what do we want to see for this lake in 20, 30, 50 years time? Because we know what it is right now, and there's lots of measurements going on right now. And if that's the iwi's aspirations for the lake, is that any different to what the council and the community are wanting too? And they are different. They're quite, this has more of a ecological health aspect, but also there's a mahingakai element, which the council's measure of health for lakes, the Rotorua Lake and all the other ones, is the trophic lake index or score, which is a very scientific measure. And it's just that you reach a certain target, and then after that it should be fine. So yeah, it's different. So these are some of the it's just a summary of the world views, the core values, which are the Y values. As I said, the whakatauki, and looking at what the aspiration for the lake is, and then you can start unpicking that and start finding some of the common or factors. And so I'll just take that. So this was the most 2006. This was Wilco, he was the CEO of the Lakes Trust, and this is Toby Curtis, who is the chair for the trust and the iwi's representative. So when they come to any big meetings with the Crown, they're representatives from the area. These are some of the kids that come and help. As one of their real goals was that we build their own capability and capacity, and they had an education unit here. So there's about 20 youth between 16 and 25 that were part of the training and capturing the field information. And these are just some of the examples, some of the pictures of our monitoring days. It was, we used the NEMA Stream Health Monitoring Kit, which is a citizen science kit, as our baseline, but we complemented that with our Mātauranga Māori methodology. So we had this tube here as a water clarity tube, so it tests the clarity of the water at your testing site. He's got a magnifying glass, so he was actually, well, he was meant to be, not burning ants, like some of them did, but we were capturing bugs on the lake edge of the ground and identifying them using some of the, I think it was a NEWA macroinvertebrate index, because the range and the types of bugs that you found also are an indication of the ecological health of the lake. And we did a lot of other physical factors too, so temperature, we did nutrients, so nitrogen levels. We attempted to do flow, but because lakes aren't really, they're not river systems, so, but it was just great to get them out there in the water. Yeah, and as part of that program, I think we had a third of their NCA level 1 science credits out of the system were recognised from the monitoring on the work. And I think 6 of them went on to work in the fishing industry. 1 went on to the Spirit of Adventure, and 3 of them went on to do environmental studies at the Polytechnic. So that was a really good outcome. It was very much one of their aspirations.
Yes.
My job was just working with them and making sure it achieves their goals. And now they've changed the model a bit, but they still do the work, which is the main thing, because all of these kids are from there, and it was part of their journey, learning their journey. So like I said, I talked about the science and some of the citizen science testing we were doing. We also did mātauranga Māori, so that's up there where Roku and Toby were, is Ngāti Rongomai. It's on Lake Rotoriti. It's Toby's marae and hapu. And at each one of the 6 sites that we went to, they're all lake edge. They were all marae sites. So we had the kaumātua and the Pākeke from each of those marae meet us on our first visit and talk to us about the history and the whakapapa of the area, the hapu that it belongs to, and the water-specific issues that they were facing. So, and that didn't always go that comfortable as we thought it would, because but as first of all, I suppose because they were their own, we weren't visitors. And some of them did feel initially that they'd been over-researched. So, oh God, here's some more researchers. I think the real difference, and I think the tipping point, it was the tipping point for many of them, is that we were training their own kids to do their own research on their own lakes, so that information is theirs, it's inherent in them. And if they ever did have any issues, they could tap on the shoulder of one of these. Come over here and I can test it. Yeah, sure.
There's a lot of sort of effort, obviously going to encouraging Māori to become healthcare workers, etc. Is the same true in environmental health and sort of environmental science in terms of encouraging Māori to study environmental science?
It's not nearly as much as health. I really wish they had a lot more support than the health sector is probably more of a forerunner. But it's different. I think the motivation's a little bit different, because in the health sciences, it's quite. I was thinking of some of my own family. They don't see it. They just see it as a lot of hard work in health. You've got this whole, if you want to be a doctor, you've got years of study and masses of debt, and and it's not practical, because a lot of them are kinesthetic learners. Through experience and touching and feeling. So there's a natural affinity for this kind of work, especially for our boys. They loved it. In fact, they only really turned up on our monitoring days because they got to get in the lakes, go swimming, use all the tools. But when I got them to start applying this, that's when I started they were struggling. So I'd love to see more investment in the area, and I think it will come eventually anyway through the settlement process, because there's a real need for this work to be complementary and be more holistic in the way we manage things. Like I said, my area seems to be the ABLES area, the ability to utilise our resources while sustainable use, I'd say. So it's not just fencing it off and protecting it never to be used again. It should be working with the environment, which is very much Te Ao Māori perspective. So if there's things that are damaged, you can tend to them straight away, but that doesn't mean you cut off them forever. They just might need to be cornered off for a couple of years to allow them to rebuild. I'd love to see more, but no, there's not really. A lot of these kids do this for fun, actually. They'll end up, they have eco warriors where they're trapping possums and stuff, and just because it's hands-on and it's outside and you don't have to do a lot of thinking. And you can see with the girls needed to do the computer work and the data entry, and the boys were all out there yelling out the numbers. So, yeah. So, oh, there's some more. I want to show you these pictures too. So it's some more of the kids. It's the pH levels, the air temperature. It's a kakahi. It's a freshwater mussel that you find in the lakes, and it is another food source. It tastes nice as sea mussels, but it's still yummy. It's sort of the boys doing the testing again. Over here, just to the left, does anyone see one of these? This is a wetland, but it's also an artificial wetland. They've designed them. This is part of the investment that's gone into the lakes. They're basically big floating barrels underneath, and they've seeded these carpets and restored, native species on these wetlands to start drawing the nutrients out of the water, because there's no more land area that they can, or they're still working with landowners to start regulating this change. But they've also become quite critical in terms of ecology, because they're now kind of housing a lot of the coda, because they can sit underneath for the shade. So they're stops them from being predated on through birds or I would call them pest fish and trout, but not everyone feels that way. Yeah, and also they can curl up on there and access some of the food material for food. Fish one day. I don't know how long that one lasted, to be honest. And someone's pot. So, oh, there you go. That was one of the not so great days. That's the site that I mentioned before. So this was actually quite good as our reference site, because it's private, it's all private land there. That's all Māori land on the lake edge there. It's not very populated in that area in comparison to Rotorua, the city. And we found, in terms of all of these indicators that we were collecting, as well as the conversations from the local hapu community members, that the overall health was still relatively good, and that's where we could find kakahi. You just walk in and lift it out. You could find the odd coda too, even during the day. So that ended up being kind of like a reference site for what this healthy looked like. And I say none of the other sites got close to that one. But then when you look around, you look at the environment, you understand why. And that's about entering the data on site. Alrighty. So yeah, I'm probably talking way too much, but that's what I like doing, because it's the people part. And then, so I had a whole lot of information and data. The hapu were happy. They have 20 trained up, newly qualified rangatahi who are all connected to the lake. So they had their equipment, they had their knowledge management systems. And I could have easily left it there, because the actual project ended at that point. But I thought, well, we've collected all this great information. We've got kaupapa Māori based information, but we still haven't used our science information other than keeping it in a system to be used at some point in time, most likely for environmental court hearings or regional plan changes. So I did ask, went back to the Lake Trust and to the board and said, would you like me to do some modelling on this? We've got all this great data. I know it's solid. I've been with you. And maybe it will help. And I'm being involved in the national debate. It was quite important to have some economic aspects, which was quite a struggle for iwi, because that's been part of the difficult conversations for a while, is that they didn't want our water to be commodified, to be just have this dollar value, and so everything's got a cost, and you know you can just buy your way out of it, and you miss the elements, the holistic nature of the way you look after a water or lake system, and the spiritual elements, so the Māori, the water elements. So that was a bit of a conversation, and it's also why when I did this research, why I wasn't looking at cost benefit, because in policy land, so just down the road there at Parliament, they're always talking about the cost benefits, the costs and what benefits are you going to get for that price, and kind of missed the point for this work, and that's where I tested it with one of my supervisors. I actually wanted to look at the effects, the costs and the effects. So if you're going to invest in improving a lake system, where are you going to invest it, and how much was the cost of that investment, but also what are the likely impacts of it. I wasn't so interested in the abels at that point, because there's always going to be trade-offs. So that's how we looked at this work, and that's some of the economic work that came out of this piece. And it came out in the first stage, which is the conceptual design, and the second phase, which was the more statistical modelling and the sciencey, the techie part. So these 3 steps here, out of all 3, the top one was the hardest, and actually I didn't really get to that top one until I'd done these 2, which was the models themselves, and that was more because we weren't quite sure what we were trying to achieve at that point in time. First of all, with the concept model, which was reflecting the tangata whenua interests, and like I said, we used the whakatoki to frame that, the proverb, te maua te waireti ana, kia kite ngā tapuai o te kaura. That helped frame it, and then we could link the science and the mātauranga factors, and then we'd do predictive modelling, so do some statistics. There's lots of steps in this thing. But we needed to figure out what was the ultimate goal. So for Te Ao Māori and for Te Arawa, the whakatoki became critical. It was the coda was the ultimate goal, and improving the abundance of the coda, because that if there's more coda in the lake, you're more likely to see its footprints. Yeah, and then the clarity is another element to that. For the regional council and the district councils to have the task of managing the lake, some of that research, like I mentioned, over the last 10 years, helped them establish an index, a lake index. They call it the Traffic Lake Index, which is a combination of environmental factors, and they've decided that the target of 4.2 score for a traffic lake score for Otago was what would determine healthy from a council perspective. We needed that because we needed that when we were doing our models to find out if we're going to achieve those outcomes or aspirations, but also what are those other factors and how they played out that space. Okay, so I talked a lot about this concept model. So this is it. Oh, sorry. These are the 3 models. You can see that's a infographic of a coda, freshwater crane. But you can see at the core in the blue part, these are the tidal values for water values for the lakes. And then And then the purple is the ngā tauranga. So these are the descriptions of the different elements of these values from a Māori perspective. And the orange text, you can't really see that here, and I'll give you slides of this a bit later. These are the scientific aspects that are a reflection of those descriptions. So just how, like I mentioned with the whakatauki, how we unpacked it, went, okay, so water clarity, coda, in abundance.
About 2 minutes left.
Okay. Then, yeah, it's the science factors that express those cultural values. Now, this is the stuff that scares people off. This was the systems modelling, which is, I just called it ecocultural. I can't even see it under there. Systems model. And it's based off a methodology that they use in lake environmental research for the Bayesian networks. So if you look at an ecosystem, you look at how it's impacted on different factors. This is actually a web-based software package, and these are all different lake factors that can contribute to the overall health of the lake. These two red components are the nutrients that go in there, phosphorus and nitrogen, and then just what happens, how they interact with the lake water systems there. Also, how lake slime or seaweeds and stuff that grow, or not seaweeds, but lake weeds, how they grow because they're fueled by the nutrients, and what the volume and scale of those it is in the lake. Like I mentioned, clarity, so these are two aspects of clarity, and a contributing factor to clarity is sediment. So sediment runoff and sediment in the lake, which determines how clear or unclear it is. So all these factors here, the nutrients, clarity, and total chlorophyll, or the in-lake plant growth, make up the trophic lake index score, and they get measured fairly regularly. Like I think it's once a month. And this part here, so this is the coda numbers, so they're actual numbers. So there's a count of coda, and then their weight, and then their sexed, and the sizes. So you can look at age classes as done. We didn't go into that intense, but there was another iwi freshwater scientist who does a lot of this work. And then they calculate these two measures. So that's catch per unit effort, which is a fisheries measure. And so that factor there and that factor there were the two lake outcome measures. Okay, so this is more just grouping some of that information, because like I said, it's quite a lot of information there. And understanding why the two models were critical, why we needed to do that. So we've looked at the coda and the aspirations for the iwi, and we've looked at what the council consider as an indication of health of the lake. Then we're looking at what we want to see for this lake. So in 50 years' time, we still want it looking the way it is, or we want it to look different, and what does that different look like? So I mentioned clarity, more abundance of coda, and from a council perspective, an improved trophic state. So it's less green and more able to do things. And these were science measures that were used in the model. So we've done all this modelling, and then we looked at what options that are currently are in use on the lake to improve the health state of it. So I looked at 4 options: wetlands, and you saw one in the picture. It was a floating wetland, but a lot of them are on the lake edge, and it's the swampy kind of areas along your lakes. Land use change, so converting pastoral lands like dairy and sheep back to native bush, ideally, especially looking for kiwi too, if not pine. And other land use changes is like fencing stock off waterways and riparian planting along the lake edge. Alum dosing, now this was, the most controversial of the interventions, but they actually put aluminium sulfates, salts, into river catchments coming into the lake, and it doses, because the water's flowing into the lake, it doses the lake with aluminium. Now this intervention actually, what it does is when you put salts in that lake, you see the murky kind of water, it catches phosphorus in the water that's dissolved in the water system, and it clumps it up, and then the phosphorus, it clumps it up, and then the phosphorus gets heavy enough that it drops to the lake bottom. And they've been treating the science that's been done suggests that they should do it for 20 years. So it should be finishing in 2027, so in 2007. They've upped the volume to keep waters clear, but it is having negative effects. And the last one is the use of all 3 plus others. And in this work, I excluded wastewater treatment, just filtered sewage water, which I know would have a huge contribution, but I didn't have the data or information for that, and I had enough. So that, you don't even want to read all of that, but that's just a summary of each one of those interventions based on the research that's available. That is the summary, believe it or not. There's at least 87 reports that were into this. But it just looked at what, and this was really necessary for the economics part, to look at the scale of the effect of each option and the cost of it too. Right, so when you saw that very brightly coloured spotty, that model there, there's actual real data that goes into it from this end. And it goes through this. There's a whole lot of statistical equations, all of these, and it comes out the results at the other end. So I looked at each one of those interventions and modelled it over time. So what we saw with the wetlands is that's the model data at the top. It was changing the levels of nutrients that were coming into the lake based on what the scientific evidence was saying. And you can see over a 50-year modelled time frame, wetlands had a really positive impact on CODA, but it didn't have a particularly big impact on the lake. The lake's the green round one and CODA's the red one. And it had a fairly minimal drop in algal growth. So it didn't have a particularly big impact on other, like in lake qualities, what it did on the CODA. Land use change also had a similar effect, but it had a bigger impact on algal growth. So that's likely to be from conversion. So the dairy and planting, which is going to be captured more on the land and less in the lake. Alum dosing. What's going on there?
So the curve is falling off just steeply, which is concerning. It's actually a negative impact on the curve abundance.
Yeah. had almost dropped the abundance, not quite by half, maybe 5.
And you've got half a drop in algal growth, but since the iwi prioritise kora, it's not helping with KAITIAKI.
Yeah. So this is because no one's ever modelled this information together. So they've got these elements, but they never had this part. They didn't see it as a particular priority or a value. But for most cases, and on this one is the Lake Trophic Index. So this is the measure that the council are tracking. Over here. Well, it did reach the target, which was 4.2 at 30 like the target. They want to reach that 4.2 by 2032. It was reached at 2036, 37. So they're not far off reaching it during their set year frame, but at what cost? Yeah, and this is why this was really informative for the EU, because they now have hard data, solid science evidence, and that's why I looked at the effects, not so much at the costs, because we would never have saw this if we just looked at the benefits, because then is your benefit better than mine? Yeah. And the last one, which is the multi-use. So it's all those three, which is currently the status quo at the moment, and what's happening. So you can see there's still a significant drop, and that's quite likely because of the alum dosing. But then when the dosing's due to stop, which is year 27, you can see it starts flattening out, and then towards the end it starts rising again. So it does look like there's a strong correlation between CODA and alum dosing. And it's likely because the nature of how alum dosing works, because it clumps the phosphorus and drops to the lake bed, and because CODA are burrowing, their natural defense mechanism is to burrow into the sand so they won't get captured. They can't burrow through that. So they're just left exposed. Yeah, and also it's probably the nature of the nutrients too impacting on them. We're not quite sure. There's more questions than answers from this, but it starts giving some pretty good insights. This also does achieve the council goal, but not quite, 4 years out from their ideal date. But that's not so bad, because under national legislation, under the MPSFM, the council have to manage it, and they have to set that limit. So at least they know where they are from that space. But once again, from an iwi perspective, it's killing off one of their natural resources. So that's really the aha moments that came out of this work. That's a summary in numerical terms, but it's also why it's important to look at it from different perspectives, because you can see through those graphs that if you only looked at it from the council perspective on trophic state, actually the two options that looked the most effective, alum dosing and the multi-use option, because it achieves the council perspectives, are the two that have the most detrimental effect on the CODA. And if you look at it solely from a Māori perspective, wetlands and land use change, you're limiting yourself too, because a lot of people around those lake catchments it's agricultural land, so you're actually asking a lot of people to now convert from like dairy or sheep through to forestry. That's a big ask, and it's not likely to happen either. So there is a need to look at different values, come at it at different perspectives, and look at how you balance it. And so that was the last part of this work. These are some of the questions that came up. So those 4 questions I had at the start. Is there a difference between the science and cultural? Yes, there is. You can see the 2 different models dealt with things very differently. The first one, the concept model, was more around values and understanding indicators and showing where the connects occur. and also ground truthing it in the aspirations of the lake. That's why that coda was quite important. Just kind of keep in mind this while we're doing it. And the second one was the more statistical and mathematical model, predictive model, actually really starts getting into the nitty gritty. So you've got numerical numbers, you're using statistical formulas to calculate a lot of this, and it's all from a scientific evidence base. So I'm happy if someone wants to check over that again. I've loved it. Fine. What are the benefits of cultural monitoring? Well, it helps re-establish the people with their land and their areas and helps them understand in a really practical way. And those tools, like that clarity tube, they use the same tools and same methods in the sewage wastewater treatment system. It's just at a bigger scale. So that those methodologies are used and applied in all different areas too, and there's a common language. And it also allows, like for this work, to know what your aspirations are and what your values are, and that they can be different, and to understand that that difference is not a bad thing, it's a good thing. If you're looking at lake management in a whole of system, then you do have to look at it from different perspectives. What has greater value, cultural science, and can these values coexist? Well, I don't think either one has greater value. I think they're both important and contribute to this dialogue. I think even more so in a post-settlement space, where we've got more waterways with their own legal identity and the need to manage them kind of like parents. Kind of need to do that. But what we did find though in this work is that the kaupapa Māori measures were actually more sensitive measures of health, and more holistic by nature than and you can see those in the graphs, than the trophic lake score. And what are the common factors that reflect both values? Water clarity was probably the main common factor. And that's a great one because it's actually a visual measure. It's also one of the things we say when you're looking at swimmable waterways. Don't go swimming just after a big rain, but if you just have a look, you'll see why. There's all the turbidity and the soils have been mixed up, and there's likely that everything's kind of coming to the surface. And then some of them are more land-based factors, so wetland and catchment land use.
I'm not going to wind up now.
Yeah, that's it. So that's it. I just with this work, I always just go back to the coda. Because that's the thing that kind of ends up ground truthing it all. So, thank you. I've probably scared away a few of your students.
Thanks, Mereana. That was fantastic. And I think the thing I really enjoy listening to you talk is not just reflecting the kaupapa Māori methods, but also, we're learning about taking an eco-health perspective, and what you did reflects so many of the principles of that as well, with your participatory approach and the kind of trying to get to the sustainability of helping the rangatahi to develop their own skills and that sort of thing. Also the transdisciplinary nature, which clearly caused you actually a few problems with getting permission to do this.
Getting agreement. Getting agreement was a hard part.
And the systems thinking. So you're embodying, from our point of view, you're embodying all of those principles as well. And it's fantastic to do it in such a practical example that's really trying to improve what. So thanks again for coming to talk to us.